When we talk about the struggle of life, the reality is that every single one of us is fighting two battles. One is on the outside, the circumstances of life, the difficulties, the trials, the pain, the disappointments. And the other is on the inside, the pull of our desires, the temptations, the whispers that tell us to choose what is easy instead of what is right. Both of these battles are constant. Both of these battles test the strength of the heart. And both of them are spoken about in the Quran with clarity and wisdom. Allah created us with desires, and He created us to be tested with hardship. The point is not to remove desire, nor to live a life without difficulty. The point is to know how to rise above those desires and those difficulties, to know how to live with purpose while holding on to faith, and the Quran gives us that framework. Think about desire. Every one of us is pulled toward things that the soul craves. Sometimes it's wealth, sometimes status, sometimes pleasure, sometimes comfort. On their own, desires are not evil. Wanting good things in life is natural. But when desires control the heart, when they dictate every decision, when they lead us away from Allah's boundaries, that's when they become destructive. The Quran warns us about becoming slaves to our own desires, because the one who is a slave to desire will never be satisfied. No matter how much they take, it is never enough. It is like drinking and drinking, but always remaining thirsty. On the other side, we face difficulties. No matter who you are, life will test you. Some people are tested with loss, others with health, others with relationships, others with poverty, and still others with success that becomes a burden in its own way. No one lives without hardship. And the Quran reminds us again and again that difficulties are part of the divine plan, not because Allah wants to punish us, but because hardship refines us, teaches us, humbles us, and brings us closer to Him if we allow it to. So how do we overcome desires and difficulties? The Quran gives us two powerful truths. The first is that desires can be controlled when you love Allah more than you love anything else. The second is that difficulties can be endured when you trust Allah more than you fear the hardship. Let's begin with desires. One of the most beautiful realities of faith is that it does not tell us to destroy desire, but to redirect it. Love is a desire, ambition is a desire, comfort is a desire. Islam doesn't say, feel nothing. It says, channel what you feel in a way that pleases Allah. So when a believer feels the pull of desire, they ask themselves, does this bring me closer to Allah or take me away from Him? That simple question becomes a shield against being controlled by impulses. And here is the truth. When Allah becomes greater in your heart than any desire, the desire loses its power over you. When the love of Allah fills the heart, it leaves less room for temptations to dominate. It doesn't mean you never feel them. It means they no longer master you. That's why those who taste the sweetness of faith describe it as more fulfilling than any pleasure of this world, because desires are temporary, but faith gives lasting peace. Now think about difficulties. The Quran never hides the fact that life is hard, but it also never leaves us hopeless in that reality. The key message is that no matter how heavy the test, Allah is greater. Every difficulty is measured. Every hardship is accounted for, and every tear is known. When the believer remembers that their pain is not wasted, that their patience is recorded, that their struggle is seen by the one who is most merciful, it gives them strength to endure what they thought was impossible. The Quran gives us the image of light after darkness, ease after hardship, hope after despair. It tells us that no hardship is permanent, and no trial lasts forever. Even if it feels endless in the moment, the believer trusts that Allah will bring relief. And in that trust, the heart finds resilience. This is why some people go through unimaginable difficulties and still remain steadfast. It is not because they are superhuman, but because their faith carries them, because they know that Allah never burdens a soul beyond what it can bear. So what happens when you combine these two truths? When you master your desires with love of Allah and endure your difficulties with trust in Him, you become free. You are no longer controlled by what your soul craves, and you are no longer broken by what life throws at you. You become anchored in something greater than both, anchored in Allah, and that is the state the Quran calls us to. But let's be honest, this is not easy. Everyone slips in desire, everyone struggles in hardship. The key is not to be perfect, but to keep striving, to fall and rise again, to feel the temptation but still choose faith, to feel the pain but still choose trust. That constant striving is what Allah values because it shows sincerity. The Quran teaches us that Allah does not expect perfection, He expects effort. He expects us to keep trying, to keep coming back, to keep holding on. And there is something else the Quran teaches us. The one who overcomes desires and difficulties is not only rewarded in the hereafter, but also experiences a unique peace in this world, because desires without control bring restlessness. Hardship without trust brings despair, but when you rise above both, your heart finds calmness. That calmness is not tied to circumstances. It is tied to your connection with Allah. That is why some of the happiest people in history were not the wealthiest or most powerful, but those whose hearts were most attached to Allah. So ask yourself, what desires am I struggling with? What difficulties am I carrying? And then ask, where is Allah in those struggles? If Allah is at the center, you will find strength you never imagined. If Allah is absent, you will feel empty no matter how much you chase or how much you gain. The Quran calls us back to Him, reminding us that every battle on the outside and every battle on the inside can only be won through Him. Let this reminder be a call to reframe how you see your life. Don't think of your desires as enemies. Think of them as tests to be redirected. Don't think of your hardships as punishments. Think of them as opportunities to show patience and to grow. Don't think of your struggles as signs of weakness. Think of them as invitations to rely more on Allah. Because at the end of the day, overcoming desires and difficulties is not about removing them from your life. It is about letting Allah guide you through them. And here is the most comforting truth. If you keep striving, Allah will cover your faults, forgive your slips, reward your patience, and strengthen your heart. He will replace fleeting desires with lasting joy and temporary pain with eternal peace. That is His promise, and His promise is always true. So hold on to faith when your desires pull you. Hold on to hope when your hardships test you. And remember that every step you take in the struggle is a step closer to Allah. And there is no greater victory, no greater freedom, and no greater reward than to have a heart guided by Him. True freedom is not about gaining every single thing that the heart craves, nor is it about removing all desires from your life. Desires are part of who we are as human beings. They were created within us for a reason. The desire to eat, to love, to succeed, to find comfort, to be recognized, to enjoy pleasure. All of these are natural. Without them, life would feel empty and stagnant. But the test is not whether you have desires. The test is whether those desires control you or whether you control them. The difference between a life led by impulse and a life guided by faith is not the absence of desires, but the ability to master them. That is where true freedom lies. Think about what happens when someone becomes enslaved to their desires. Their entire life revolves around chasing satisfaction. They feel restless when they don't get what they want, and they feel anxious that what they have might be taken away. And the more they chase, the more unsatisfied they become. That is because desires, when left unchecked, are endless. No amount of wealth, pleasure, or recognition can fully satisfy a heart that is attached to them. It is like pouring water into a container with a hole at the bottom. It will never stay full. The person keeps drinking, but the thirst never ends. Now imagine another person who has the same desires, the same cravings, but chooses to put Allah above them. This person feels the pull of temptation, but reminds themselves of Allah's presence. They want something in the moment, but step back to ask whether this will bring them closer to Allah or distance them from Him. They discipline themselves to say no, even when it feels hard. And in that act of self-control, they experience a sweetness deeper than any temporary pleasure could give them. That sweetness is the peace that comes from choosing Allah over desire. This is why true freedom is not about indulging in every craving, but about breaking free from being a slave to them. Because when you are chained to your desires, you are never really free. You are always restless, always wanting, always chasing. But when Allah is greater in your heart, you can feel content even when you deny yourself. You can feel strong even when you walk away from temptation. That feeling is more powerful than any momentary satisfaction. The Quran describes the difference between the one who follows desires blindly and the one who rises above them. The first becomes lost, wandering without direction, because their desires change every day. One day it is wealth, the next it is status, the next it is pleasure. They are pulled like a leaf in the wind, never stable, never grounded, but the one who puts Allah above their desires finds stability. They are anchored, they know their purpose, and they have a direction. Even when they feel tempted, even when they slip, they come back because they know who they serve. Every time you say no to a desire for the sake of Allah, you are strengthening your heart. You are proving to yourself that your soul is not weak, that you are capable of discipline, and that you value Allah more than what your ego craves. And the amazing thing is that Allah rewards that struggle immensely. Even if no one sees you resist, even if no one appreciates the fight you went through in silence, Allah sees it, and Allah records it as an act of worship. That moment of turning away from temptation for His sake becomes a means of His mercy and His closeness. There is also another side to this. Sometimes desires are not only about sin, they are also about comfort. The desire to always be at ease, to avoid sacrifice, to avoid hardship. That desire can prevent us from achieving great things in faith. But when Allah becomes greater in your heart, you push through the discomfort for Him. You fast even when hungry, you give charity even when you feel the pinch, you pray even when tired, you forgive even when your ego wants revenge. Each of those moments is proof that Allah is greater to you than your own comfort. And the more you do it, the freer your soul becomes. There is a sweetness in denying yourself for Allah that those enslaved to desire will never taste. They may laugh at you, they may say you are missing out, they may mock your discipline, but deep down you know that their laughter hides emptiness. They have what they crave but are still restless. You, on the other hand, may sacrifice, but you carry peace. And that peace is priceless. That peace is the mark of a heart guided by Allah. And remember, it is not about being perfect. Every human being feels desire, and every human being slips at times. The point is to keep striving, to never surrender to being controlled by your desires. If you fall, rise again. If you slip, repent. If you feel weak, turn to Allah for strength, because every effort counts, and every time you choose Allah over temptation, your heart grows stronger. The whispers of desire will never fully stop. They will always be there in some form, trying to pull you away. But when you nurture your love for Allah, when you remember Him often, when you keep His greatness alive in your heart, those whispers lose their power. They no longer drag you the way they once did. They become small, faint, manageable, and the more you grow in faith, the more you experience what real strength feels like. The strength of being free. True freedom is to stand before your desires and say, "You do not control me, my heart belongs to Allah." True freedom is to feel temptation and smile, knowing that turning away for Allah's sake will bring you more joy than giving in ever could. True freedom is not being empty after indulgence, but being full after obedience. And when Allah grants you that freedom, you carry a peace that cannot be shaken by anything this world offers. That is the strength that the Quran calls us to, and that is the path to real success. Life will test you in ways you never thought you could endure. The challenges you face are not random, nor are they without meaning. Every single difficulty that crosses your path has been measured with precision. Nothing that comes into your life is beyond your ability to handle with the help of Allah. Every hardship has its limit, every storm has its end, and every moment of pain has already been accounted for by the one who knows you better than you know yourself. Even when you feel overwhelmed, Even when you feel like no one understands the weight you carry, remember that Allah does. He is fully aware of every tear that falls from your eyes, every sigh that escapes your chest, and every restless night you spend turning over your worries. Not a single moment of your struggle goes unseen. Patience is not about pretending you do not hurt. It is not about being emotionless or acting as if pain does not reach you. Real patience is to admit that you feel broken, but to still trust that Allah has a plan within that brokenness. It is to cry, to feel weak, to stumble, but to never give up your hope in His wisdom. Patience is to acknowledge the storm, but to hold firmly to the rope of Allah while it rages around you. When you live with that kind of trust, you may bend under the weight of your trials, but you will not break. Many people think strength means being untouched by hardship, but real strength is surviving through hardship without losing faith. It is about allowing your heart to anchor itself in the certainty that Allah is with you, even when everything else feels uncertain. The storm may shake you, but if your heart is tied to Him, you will not be destroyed by it. This world was never meant to be a place of ease. It was meant to be a place of testing. The Quran reminds us that struggle is part of the design of life. If it were not for pain, we would not know healing. If it were not for hardship, we would not appreciate relief. If it were not for loss, we would not value blessings. The tests are not punishments. They are opportunities to grow, to prove our faith, and to draw closer to Allah in ways we never would if life was always easy. Sometimes what feels like the hardest blow ends up being the very thing that saves you. It pushes you back to prayer, it strips away your arrogance, it reminds you of how fragile you are, and it forces you to seek refuge in Allah. What looked like a breaking point becomes a turning point. What felt like the end becomes the beginning of a new strength inside you. That is the mercy hidden in every trial. It may not always be obvious in the moment, but with time you look back and realize that Allah was guiding you through every step, teaching you lessons and preparing you for what lies ahead. It is important to know that struggle looks different for everyone. For some, it is health. For others, it is family. For others, it is financial stress or loneliness. Each heart is tested in its own way, and just because your test looks different from someone else's does not mean it is smaller or easier. Allah knows the exact measure of what each soul can carry. He does not burden you with more than you can bear, even if you feel like you are at your breaking point. The fact that you are still breathing, still standing, still moving forward, even in small steps, is proof that you have strength greater than you realize. The Quran gives us a powerful perspective on trials. They are temporary. The pain you feel today will not last forever. Every hardship is followed by relief. Every dark night is followed by dawn. Allah promises that after difficulty, ease will come, but the ease does not only mean the end of the trial. Ease can also mean the strength He places in your heart while the trial is still happening. Ease can be the calm that suddenly settles inside you even though nothing around you has changed. Ease can be the patience you discover within yourself that you never knew you had. Ease can be the way a heavy burden feels lighter simply because you handed it over to Allah in your prayers. When you remind yourself that Allah sees every moment of your struggle, it changes the way you carry it. Instead of feeling crushed, you begin to feel honored that He has trusted you with this test. Instead of asking, "Why me?" you begin to ask, "What is Allah teaching me?" Instead of drowning in despair, you begin to rise with hope, knowing that every second of your endurance is being recorded as an act of worship. Your struggle becomes meaningful, your pain becomes purposeful, and your journey becomes sacred. Think about how storms work. They come with force, they shake everything around them, but eventually they pass. The trees that have deep roots survive. The ones that are shallow are uprooted. In the same way, when life's storms come, those whose hearts are deeply rooted in faith may sway, may bend, but they do not fall. Their connection to Allah keeps them grounded. If your heart is anchored in Him, no storm will ever truly destroy you. And here is something beautiful. Sometimes Allah allows the storm to rage so that you can discover how strong your roots really are. Sometimes He shakes your life so that you can let go of the things that were never serving you and hold tightly to the one who never leaves you. Sometimes the storm is not there to break you, but to shape you into someone stronger, more compassionate, more grateful, and more resilient. So when you face your next difficulty, remember this: you do not have to hide your pain to be patient. You do not have to be unshaken to be strong. Cry if you need to, but cry to Allah. Feel your weakness, but place your trust in His strength. The storm may rage, but if your heart remains anchored in Him, it will never destroy you. That is real strength. That is the strength the Quran calls us to.